Hello there, Jason. I want to say what an honor it is to have you here with me on the show because I first started learning about podcasting from you. And I consider you to be one of my early mentors in my internet business journey. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience. Who are you and how did you get started with your business?
Yeah, so as you said, my name's Jason Van Orden. I am a co-host and co-founder of internetbusinessmastery.com. That's what most people know me from today, which is the longest running internet marketing podcast, started in 2005. And we help people to launch their business online and get out of that job that they hate. We help them discover what their strengths are, what they want to offer most to the world, and then start a profitable business that's both fulfilling for them and also gives them a lifestyle that they want to live. And that's something we've now done for over 5,000 entrepreneurs through our academy training. But it wasn't always what I thought I would end up doing, but it's certainly what I love doing most today is to help people live lives of increasing freedom, fulfillment, and purpose.
Yeah, I do remember the days when I was listening to your podcast from my corporate cube, just thinking about how you guys really gave me the will to live. And so your show really inspired me to be an entrepreneur. I'd love to ask you what inspired you to be in business for yourself. Was there an aha moment that led you to start the company that you have now?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to ask me even 10, 15 years ago when I was in college and coming out of college, I had no idea that that's what I would end up being as an entrepreneur. It's not like I was selling lemonade when I was 5 years old or going door to door selling, little crafts or something. I was just doing the traditional thing that society had taught me to do. But it didn't take long after a couple years of being a cubicle worker to realize that I wasn't happy. I'd hit the snooze button 5 times in the morning. I'd have that Sunday dread feeling of, oh no, it's going to be about time to go to bed, get up in the morning, go to work. I felt like my time wasn't my own. And that just, gave me a lot of anxiety and frankly drained all my energy and left me a little depressed about life. Like, is this really it? And I thought that maybe I just needed to grow up and become more of an adult and go numb like everybody else. But thankfully, I ended up reading a book that somebody gave me called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which was very popular at the time. I'm sure many people listening to this have either read that or maybe they've read 4-Hour Work Week or $100 Startup or one of these books that open their eyes to other possibilities. And for me, that was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It wasn't really heavy on actionability. It wasn't, actionable content, but it didn't gave me a vision of the fact that I needed to be a business owner in order to be able to create the life that I really wanted. So that's the moment, that was the aha moment as far as I'm unemployable. But then I'd say it was a 2 or 3 year process of learning and seeking and finding mentors and trying different things and dabbling in real estate investing for a while and then discovering that I was good at marketing, then discovering I was good at consulting and doing consulting for a while. And, every step was a new aha moment about myself, about the strengths that I had, about the kind of life I really wanted to live. I learned real estate investing did not make me happy, but teaching other people did. And so I started gearing myself towards businesses that allowed me to do that. And my consulting and seminar working around marketing is what led me to eventually discover marketing on the internet to reach more people. So this would have been around 2004. And then in early 2005, podcasting came up on my radar. And the aha moment there was that this was going to be a significant technology that would give people a voice and have a huge impact in terms of branding, marketing, teaching, communications. And I wanted to be the world's foremost expert on business podcasting. And that's exactly what I did for the next 3 or 4 years. One of the few podcasts that I started during that time, Internet Business Mastery, took off and became incredibly popular. And that is now what is my full-time pursuit because I enjoy it so much. And it was just, it was a new channel and a new approach that wasn't the usual guru on the mountain approach to teaching internet business. And it seemed to really resonate with people. And so we realized eventually we had a business on our hands. So it's not like there was one aha moment where it's like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur today. But, it's like definitely it's a series of probably a dozen different aha moments that have led to where I am today. And just like I said earlier, increasing freedom, fulfillment, and happiness in my life and my business. And that's exactly what I try to bring to others now, too.
So in the beginning of your journey, did you experience what a lot of early stage entrepreneurs experience, which is a bit of a roller coaster journey before you settle down to the business idea that you really found yourself passionate about that actually took off? I mean, I know I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, and it seems like, a lot of folks out there who are, in business for themselves. Like even some of the people that I really admire, like Natalie Sisson of the Suitcase Entrepreneur, for example. I mean, she's talked about her entrepreneurial journey as being, a wild roller coaster ride. And a lot of folks in the internet marketing world that I've met have, said similar things. Was it like that for you? Did you have a lot of ebb and flow of income and, things that totally bombed, companies that you failed at?
Yes, absolutely. And any entrepreneur who tells you that it's otherwise is either lying or else just conveniently leaving out the truth, basically.
Really,
entrepreneurship. Right. Yeah. Well, and there are some people who get lucky and have an early success and maybe seem extremely, like everything they touch is golden, but, eventually they're going to have their downturn as well. It's just the way that it comes, with the territory. So, what I tell people is if you're going to be an entrepreneur, one of the most important things you can do is become comfortable with discomfort and uncertainty. And the more that you can do that, the more you're going to thrive, the more you can learn to trust your own instincts, your own creativity, and your own ability to rise to the occasion no matter what comes and figure it out and overcome the fear, the doubt, the overwhelm that naturally comes with that, the better you're going to do. And I've absolutely had those moments where I thought, I quit my job cold turkey in 2003, which is kind of a crazy thing and not many people do that. But I knew that I was willing to do whatever it took, cash out my 401k, live with my parents, get some credit cards, get rid of cable and eat out less or whatever, and that was all stuff that I did because I knew I had to figure it out. Now, that said, 3 years later, I was still trying to, pay my bills and make ends meet, or, I guess 2003, 2005, maybe. So the first couple of years, definitely, I was still wondering whether or not I have to go back and get a job, was I actually cut out for this? And thankfully, I finally had a moment where I got this email that it was for a marketing product that I had created. I'd held a seminar, made money off of it, had 25 students sign up at $200 a piece. And then I had the foresight to record that and turn it into a product because I'd learned about information marketing. And I was now trying to sell it on the internet. And at that time, there's no podcast, no social media, no, Facebook wasn't even conceived in anyone's mind yet. So like forums were where people talked and had community. And so I posted articles to forums, and one person found one of my articles with the little sales invite call to action at the bottom, clicked through. It was somebody I didn't know. It wasn't my mom. It wasn't my dad. It wasn't my best friend. Somebody I didn't know that had bought this program. And I got this email from PayPal saying, "You've got money." And that was a life-changing moment. It's what I call my money milestone. And in that moment, I knew that I was never going to have to go back and get a job. I knew that if I'd done it once, I could do it 5 times, 10 times, 100 times, and that I would figure it out. I'd figured out how to identify an audience, create value for them, and have somebody be willing to pay for that value. And that's all that entrepreneurs do. And it hasn't been all smooth sailing since then, but I know that whatever happens, if something tanks, I'll just find another audience. I'll find another value, or I'll figure out what I did wrong, and I'll just keep going.
Okay, so that's really fascinating. So, what year was this when you hit your money milestone?
So the money milestone would have happened. That would have been in 2005. And so it was in 2005 was kind of a pivotal year. I had that money milestone. I discovered podcasting and started some new stuff in podcasting. A lot happened in that year.
So between the time that you quit your job cold turkey and when your business started to actually, generate a sustainable, like a profit that you were happy with, how long was that time period?
It was somewhere between, I would say it was about 3 or 4 years.
Okay, folks, do you hear that? This is one of the most successful internet business marketers that I know, and it took him 3 to 4 years, so don't feel bad and don't.
Right.
Right. All right, so now that your business is like taking off and thriving, I'd love to know what your typical day looks like.
Well, now my typical day, currently I live in Paris, France. And, a lot of mornings I'll wake up first thing in the morning. I was fortunate for many years there not to have an alarm clock. Now my alarm clock is named Cece and his 2-year-old daughter that I love dearly. And around 6:37, she gets me up. But, I love the fact that I can spend some time with her in the morning. And then we have the means to have a live-in nanny to help take care of her. And so when our nanny gets up, then I get to sit down and I look at my list of things to do. And I typically try to start hitting some content creation right away, start doing some writing or some outlining of content first thing. I find that creative power first thing in the morning is a good time to tap into things and not get distracted by email or by, brush fires that can come by all the typical things we might do, like, oh, let's bring up Facebook or let's bring up my Gmail or whatever. So I'll typically spend the morning doing some content creation of some sort, getting a lot of things outlined. Because I'm about 8 hours ahead of my business partner who's in the United States Mountain Time, about the time he's showing up at his desk, it's about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my time. And so he's starting to look over stuff that I've outlined or put together and, put his input and his take on those things as well. And usually mid-afternoon, like I might go for a bike ride around Paris is one of my favorite things to do. My wife and I will go grab one of these city bikes. That's basically you get a membership and you can grab a bike from a station, ride it across Paris and drop it off at another station. Then come back, have dinner with my family. And then I typically will do a little bit more work in the evening, another hour, maybe two, just because of the time zone shift. So I just, kind of put my schedule around that. But, around dinner time and then after dinner, I'm spending time with my family and then, wrapping up a few things and deciding what I'm going to do the next day. And that's my typical day right now.
Wow, you're giving me such nostalgia for Paris. I was an exchange student in Paris in '93. And
oh, nice.
I used to just love to take a bus to one end of the city and walk along the Seine to the other end of the city. And that would take me about 2.5 hours, and it would be so beautiful. And I just really enjoyed that. So, such a special place.
Absolutely.
So help me understand how your business may or may not have evolved since I knew you, because I remember the program that I invested in was Traffic Attraction Formula. So is your business still primarily online courses, or what other training programs do you sell?
Yeah, so our main training program, and we focus on our audience is mostly people just getting started in internet business, and we sell training to them that's an A to Z how to get started online. It starts right up front with let's design your lifestyle, let's figure out what it is you really want so you create a business that will provide for that. Because the worst thing you can do is start a business and either find out you hate it, or even worse, it's successful and you hate it. So we make sure that people start a business that they'll love so they actually keep going until it succeeds. And then we teach, it's everything from what's your niche and creating a brand and getting online and social media and a website and all the way up to selling your first product. And that's the bread and butter of what we do. The program that you invested in is very similar, though it was focused specifically on how to launch a podcast to create that brand. Whereas, most people will teach something like blogging just because there's less logistics with it, though podcasting is definitely having a big resurgence these days in terms of popularity of people starting them. But it's always been around that idea of, let's help people just like that are just where we were, in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, both my business partner and I, who didn't know each other yet, were stuck in a job that we hated. And we knew what it was like to go through that and have that journey of figuring it out. And so we speak to an audience that's a past version of ourselves and share with them our journey and everything that we've learned along the way to help them achieve a similar lifestyle and freedom for themselves. And so that's everything from digital courses that go up to then full-blown coaching, group coaching experiences where they get increased access to us, through email and maybe even live masterminds and things like that. But the big part of what we sell is digital products because it's scalable. We can help more people and it allows us more flexibility in our lifestyle as well.
So how do you attract your target customers? I mean, how do you find and get in front of people who are, early stage entrepreneurs? I can imagine there's a bunch of people that are still in cubes, dreaming of the day that they can kick down their cubicle walls and, claim their freedom. And there's other folks that might have already left, or they're just trying to do all the internet marketing on the side. So, where do you find these folks?
Well, the biggest source of prospects and traffic for us since the very beginning of Internet Business Mastery has been content marketing, which is all the big buzzword now. It's not, we didn't, all we knew is we were just creating a show that was fun for us and that we were hoping some people would listen to. But like I said, it ended up taking off even more than we ever expected. But it's always been the podcast. It's been the podcast that we've put out every week now for 9 years. And
That's dedication. Wow.
We've been doing it a long time. And, it goes into iTunes. It goes on our blog. It shows up in Google. I think we've been around long enough. I think we get a lot of word of mouth now, but it's all about our content that is geared to attract that specific prospect. And the people who find and listen to our show, by the time they decide, wow, I got to do this. I really want to do this. I'm getting to know, like, and trust these guys. I think I can do it. I want to start an internet business. I want that freedom that they're talking about. From our podcast, we get them on the email list. And then from the email list, we can move them towards being a buyer. But it's been the content from the very beginning. We do some blogging as well, but it's always been primarily podcasts. We actually have 2 podcast shows now, and then we do a bit of blogging. But it's just creating great content for a very specific audience that solves their pain and their problem, and then proposes a solution to them.
What's your other podcast?
So we just recently started a podcast called the Internet Business Mastery Audio Blogs. The main show comes out every Wednesday, and that's like an in-depth discussion on, various topics. But we noticed in our statistics, we did an experiment last year where just to repurpose content and get more, traction out of it, whenever we do a blog post, we would do an audio version of one of us reading it. Whoever wrote the post would then read it. And we put a few of those into iTunes, and they tend to be short just because these blog posts are, 500 to 1,000 words. And so these posts, these audio blogs were 10 or 15 minutes instead of like a full-on 45 minutes like our main show. And we noticed that there was a big increase in the numbers for the downloads of those shows. And it was actually quite surprising. We didn't expect that. It's hard to know exactly why there was such an increase. I mean, in some cases, it was double the downloads of the main show. In some cases, it was maybe 30% more, but significant nonetheless. Our best theory is just that, the way that everyone's attention is fractured these days because we're all carrying smartphones and we all have broadband connections in our pocket all day long, and we have so many things vying for our attention. Shorter is becoming better, more in demand, more efficient for people's time. And so we decided, let's start a full-on separate feed, call it the audio blogs, every week. In addition to our main show, then on Friday, we'll have a separate feed where we have, what we call our concise best tips in under 15 minutes. And people have really been enjoying it.
Why did you decide to split it off into a separate podcast? Why not just blend it into your main show?
Yeah, there's arguments for going both ways. And if you'd asked me maybe 5 years ago, I would have said just keep it all in one feed and don't split up your statistics and make it more convenient for people. Well, part of it is an experiment, honestly. When we first started, and even for the first several years, we were one of, only a handful of people talking internet business. Since 2009, that has changed significantly. And in the last 2 years, the proliferation of shows in our specific market has been immense. And we wanted to see what would happen if we launched a brand new feed and from scratch got a ton of 5-star reviews and put in a lot of effort into, putting out just frequent, consistent content right from the start and just do all the things that we taught about how to launch a podcast and see what would happen. And then also just have a second touch point in iTunes as well, a second show that comes up and maybe have our logo show up in more than one place when people do searches or look at the top lists. So it's partly an experiment to see how that goes. Also, I think sometimes people appreciate being able to have the choice or separate them out. They'll just turn on a podcast and just listen one show after the other. And if that means it's a long show followed by a really short show and then another long show, I don't think they find that as convenient as if they're like, I just want to listen to something short. I'm going to, bring up their audio blog feed right now and listen to that. But I could probably make an argument the other way too. So I don't have like a definitive answer for you really.
Okay. Yeah. Because I just started turning my video series into audio and pushing that to my main podcast. So I have these 1 hour interviews and then it's followed by maybe a couple 5-minute short audio clips. So that's interesting. So I might play around with your suggestion. But I'd love to take you to your early days of podcasting, because I remember you just mentioned that you had started several podcasts. So did it take you a while before you found the one that really stuck?
Yeah, well, like I said, when I discovered podcasting, I wanted to become the foremost expert on business podcasting. I saw a huge potential there, but nobody was talking about podcasting other than just geek bloggers. And blogging hadn't even hit the same stride that it has today. Podcasting for sure was like this thing, like almost like a little underground, like ham radio type thing. I mean, that's the best thing I can compare it to. And so when this word podcasting showed up and I went searching for it, Google said, well, did you mean, and suggested a different word because Google didn't even know what podcasting was yet. And all I could scrape up were just a few of these highly technical blog posts about enclosures and MP3s and sampling rates and, RSS feeds. And thankfully I had an audio and an engineering background, so I understood that stuff. I was like, well, look, I think this is going to grow, and people coming in, whether for hobby or business purposes, they need something a lot easier to learn how to do this. So I started a podcast about how to podcast. And there were a couple others at the time, mostly just interviewing other podcasters. And I don't think anybody, in my opinion, there wasn't any blogger or podcaster really doing a good job of doing it in layman's terms. So that's why I started that podcast. And I had a site with a tutorial that did very well, and it's still a top result. In fact, I could check right now, but I'm pretty sure it's still the number one result in Google for how to podcast. And, these days it's a lot easier to find these tutorials and things online. So in addition to that how to podcast show for fun, I just started one because I just wanted to just figure it out. I didn't want to just be a podcaster podcasting about podcasting. I wanted to have something else. So I decided to start one just for fun. At that time, I had just recently moved to New York City, and so many of my friends were just fascinated about what is it like to live in Manhattan. So I thought, well, I'll do a show about living in New York City. Now, I only ever did 10 or 11 episodes of that show. It was called Cast. I don't think it exists anymore online. I've since let it expire. But that was kind of like, hey, I'm just going to get this thing started, do something I just think is fun in order just to figure the process out. So those were my first two ones. One totally for fun to figure out the process, and then a podcast to start positioning me as a podcasting expert. And then about that same time, I had this two-man mastermind with a friend back in Utah. We'd get on the phone every once in a while, and that's Jeremy, who's my co-host today. And we just happened one day to decide, we should start a podcast together. Well, what do we want to do it about? Well, let's do with something that we think is fun. We talk about anyway, internet business. Well, how can we be different than anybody else out there? They all have Ferraris and big, mansions that they're standing in front of saying, come learn how I made millions and billions of dollars online. And we're like, well, we won't say that. We'll just say we're making money online. And we're just two normal guys. So listen to our journey if you want. We're just going to talk about these things. And it really resonated with people. And that one, I think, Jeremy and I just wanted a project to do together. Again, we didn't think it was a business. Now, since then, it's taken off and become immensely popular and become a business. But those are the three different podcasts that I started. And at some point, Internet Business Mastery took over our schedule so much so that we both made the strategic decision to set other projects aside and to really let this business grow into the potential that it had.
So given that there's been a bit of a podcasting renaissance and it's gotten a lot more, kind of noisy and competitive in this space, it's a bit harder to kind of to stand, there's so many different shows that are now vying for people's attention. Which is better, to have a show that really talks about a wide range of topics or to have a highly targeted show? So an example of a show that talks about a wide range of topics might be the Joe Rogan Show. It seems like he just has people on who he's really interested in speaking to, but, the subject matter can kind of, really range, widely. Or do you think it's just better to have, the one show about this particular niche? What do you think?
Well, it depends on your goals. If you're doing it for fun, if you're doing it to supplement a brand you already have, or if you're trying to start a new brand and make money with it. Somebody like Joe Rogan, he was, at least to my knowledge, already a comedian with somewhat of a following. And so this was a way for him to, cut out some of the middlemen in between him and his audience, the places that he had to, this is just an example, like let's say Comedy Central and, wherever else a comedian might appear to get in front of his audience. Now he could talk to them directly about the projects and things that he had going on or things that mattered to him. So I don't know all his reasons for starting that. Clearly something like NPR is just looking to supplement their current brand and make it easier for people but people already know about NPR. People already know NPR for what they're doing. Somebody that's more just like you or me that know, and we're maybe just trying to establish ourselves or take our expertise or our brand or our authority to the new level. I think you're way better served to be very, 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 very specific about the audience that you want to reach, which was a mistake that we made early on. In fact, we talked far too broadly about internet marketing. We thought, we want everybody to get a little something out of our business or out of our podcast. So we talk about eBay, and then we might have an episode that was targeted towards somebody who was an executive at a, marketing executive at a company. And then another time we'd be talking to a beginner, and another time we'd have an intermediate thing. And eventually we said, okay, wait a second, this is all over the place. And it was when we surveyed our audience and we thought about, who do we really want to reach, that we decided, no, this is for beginners. We are going to make a show for beginners, people just starting out. And so if the topics are too advanced, if the topics, we want somebody who was like us, stuck in a job, they want to get out and they just want to get started. And that really, really helped us to be more clear in our content, to resonate more with our audience, to have them feel like, wow, this really is for me. And I think Joe Rogan knows specifically who his audience is as well. He just has different goals, and certainly an entertainment type comedy thing. It's a different thing than, say, like a nonfiction topic where you're trying to be an expert. So if you want to make money and do something in a podcast like what we do, then you're going to have to be very, very specific about who you want to reach.
Okay, so that's really good advice. Now, as you probably know, and as I've discovered, podcasting can be a lot of work. I mean, I found it was, for the amount of work that I've been putting into producing these podcasts, I found that, I was hoping to get more traffic, from them, more listeners, but it's been a bit more of a gradual increase in listenership than, say, for example, what John Lee Dumas was able to accomplish. Just massive downloads, like hundreds of thousands of downloads, like every month. And so, of course, he was kind of like a machine, for the first 6 months of, producing daily podcasts. But I'd say, like, for everyone else, like for the rest of us, how, long does it take to really start seeing a, strong, viable listenership to the point where you can actually start making money from the podcast?
Well, here's the good news is that when we started making pretty good money, like good money, 6 figures from our podcast, I'd say we only had. What's that? From the podcast alone.
From what? From advertising?
No, from selling our own products.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, advertising, you're not going to, John Lee Dumas makes good money from advertising, but he has hundreds of thousands of downloads because he does a show every day. So multiply by 7 what most people do, which is just a weekly show, right? So the point I want to make here is that, like, we only had a list of maybe an email list, because that's where you ultimately make the money, is getting people onto an email list. We had an email list of around 3,000 people back when we launched our first coaching course, and it would have been like 2007, I want to say, early 2007. And, and we made, I think that thing brought us like $80,000 that launch. Okay. So
is that your first launch?
Yes. Well, not my first launch ever as an entrepreneur, but the first launch for Internet Business Mastery. Yes.
Okay. So you'd been podcasting for 2 years, and during that time, you were able to track that you grew your list directly from your podcast to 3,000 people during that time.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, a few things have changed since then. This niche of business, and particularly internet business, like I said, since 2009, it has exponentially grown, the competition. Now, this isn't the case for every niche in iTunes. It all depends. And there's still plenty of markets out there that, even if they have several podcasts, a lot of them aren't very good, or a lot of them haven't stuck around. However, as you can imagine, podcasting and marketing and internet business, like those things all kind of go hand in hand. So, our market is one of the ones that's, along with like tech and, like geek culture, are a couple of the ones that have had podcasts for a long time. And so they've grown to the point now where it's an immense competition. So in order to stand out, you got to do something that everyone else isn't doing, whether that's targeting a specific audience, whether that's in your format, something. Now, John, he's a great example of doing that. He said, okay, fine, I'm going to do one every day. Nobody's doing that. I'm going to do one every day. And so that's why he stood out. Now, he's had crazy growth. It's astonishing, the growth that he's had. And I don't know that anybody could do the same thing and get the exact same results right now. It's just,
is he human?
He's not. Well, I've met the guy, and sometimes I wonder that too myself. And he works hard. I'm not by any means diminishing what he's done. He's worked hard. He's smart. I think he made some very savvy decisions. And then I think he's had a lot of very good fortune along, and hit some things just at the right moments as well with what he's done. But it's not like you can just mimic what he's done and get the same exact results per se. So, you have to the point I'm trying to make there is you have to have reasonable expectations as well. How long can it take? It's going to depend on which niche you're in. If you're coming into a niche where podcasting is more relatively new, you could actually grow quite quickly. But again, the most important thing is you got to know who specifically your audience is, and you got to be doing something to stand out. Look, like we all have only so much time to listen to podcasts, and I've only got one or two. I've on my podcast, it's gonna be different for everyone. On my iPhone, I've got like 4 podcasts right now, and only one of them is a marketing podcast. And that just happens to be right now. And so I got to be very judicious about, okay, well, which one am I going to give my attention? And it changes, it changes every once in a while. So you got to have something to stand out in your brand, or else you're going to get drowned out and not found through. It's not like you're just going to launch a podcast on iTunes and get a following. That was the case maybe 5 years ago. Now you've got to work a little harder at it.
So what are some strategies to launch a podcast and maximize your visibility and traffic? So one thing that I discovered, which I wish I did differently, is I wish I came out with my podcast with like 7 episodes, like, and pushed them out right away. I had a bunch of episodes ready, but I, still like, drip them out like, twice a week. And so if I were going to do it all over again, I would, sandbag like maybe 10 podcast episodes. And the week that I launched, just, push all 10 out like one after another and get all the guests to like start promoting that launch week, just to make to optimize my possibility of showing up in the new and noteworthy section of iTunes. So I'd love to hear some of the strategies that worked for you in growing your podcast traffic.
Yeah, so back in 2007, I figured out that iTunes basically works like a search engine, like Google. And search engines want 2 things. They have one primary goal, and that is to give the people who are using that search engine the best stuff. Now, the definition of best stuff, I think, can be broken down into 2 categories: the most relevant stuff, and then the highest quality stuff. So, if I search on Google about how to move to France, like for me to keep using Google, I want to feel like Google has up at the top of the results given me something that's very specifically targeted to moving to France and something that is high quality related to those topics that I can go and look at. And it's the same thing inside of iTunes. Now, Google has been a search engine for a very, very long time, very successful search engine, has gotten quite sophisticated in the way that they do their algorithm. iTunes, as it turns out, is still quite simple in the data that they look at as far as deciding. Now, I think they are, improving that all the time, but it's pretty simple what they look at to determine what's the most relevant and what's the most authoritative or highest quality content. And as far as, becoming the most relevant it's choosing which category that you're in. Now, there's only a limited number of those that you can place yourself in, but you can put more than one category inside of your feed that you want to be listed in. It's choosing very carefully the keywords that you put for your title, for your author field, and for the description for your podcast, so that if people search, if you have those keywords in your podcast, that's how iTunes is going to know that you're relevant to those keywords. And so you have a higher chance of coming up under those categories or for those searches, or as being indicated as being related to or relevant to a particular topic. And then as far as being seen as high quality content, it's pretty simple there too. It's ratings and it's reviews, and it's how many people have clicked on the subscribe button within iTunes, because iTunes has no idea how many people total are subscribed to your podcast, because people could be subscribing through your website or other, Stitcher or other players. But what it does know is how many people have clicked on that subscribe button on your listing page within iTunes in the last, all time, but I think they're looking specifically in the last several days, how many people. So it's kind of a rolling, ongoing thing as far as popularity. So one of the best things you can do when you launch a new show is to get people in there, anybody and if you already have a following on social media or email, you got to get people in there clicking that subscribe button and leaving you a 5-star rating and review. With this brand new show that we just did, we set a goal for April. We said we want to get 50 ratings and reviews, and we did. We hit that, and that's because we invited our audience. We told them, hey, this is why we launched a new show for you. You told us this is what you wanted. We'd love to get this out to as many people as possible. We gave them a bit of an incentive. We said, look, if we hit 50 reviews in April, then we'll release a free training about how to launch a show successfully online, specifically a podcast. And so we got that. And so that's, helping us start to pop up in the new and noteworthy and what's hot lists and things like that. I like your idea of having multiple episodes already in the feed, because it's one thing to show up in iTunes, and iTunes probably does look at the fact of like how consistent you are, but it's one thing to have people, see you in the new and noteworthy or in the what's hot list. But if they click through and all they see is one episode, I know to some people that's going to kind of say, oh, maybe these people aren't really, dedicated at this. But if you have like 4 or 5, I think you're much more likely for people to go, oh, this looks cool, and it looks like they got a bunch of content here and they're doing it consistently. So even if you backdate some of those episodes, so it's like you have 5 weekly episodes showing up through your blog feed, that's going to look a lot better and encourage more people to subscribe to your show.
Great. So I'm kind of curious, since you work with so many aspiring entrepreneurs and basically, walk them through the process of starting an internet business. I'd love to ask you, what is the fastest type of internet business that a aspiring entrepreneur can start?
The fastest to make money?
Yes.
Well, essentially, entrepreneurship and making money in any kind of venture, is getting the right offer in front of the right people. So picking a specific audience, finding what their pain is, creating a solution for that pain, and getting that offer in front of them such that they believe that your offer will solve the pain for them. I talk about how we launched Internet Business Mastery with content marketing. And the truth is, like, content marketing, very, very, very effective for converting people. And over time is very effective for building a brand, but it's not going to be fast. It's not like you're going to start a blog or a podcast or a video show today and have sales. In most cases, you're not going to like have sales this month. So if you want to make money fast, it's got to be paid traffic, or you have two choices: paid traffic or joint venture traffic, meaning that you're partnering with somebody who already has an audience and is willing to let you piggyback essentially off of the relationship that they have with that audience and promote you to that audience. And that's typically going to mean you're giving them a percentage of the money from the buy up. So you got to be out there buying traffic through something like Facebook, and then you've got to have a good product to sell to them. Now, the fastest way to have a product to sell to them is going to be to pick up an affiliate product that somebody else has already made. Meaning that you don't have to take the time yourself to go out and make the product and decide whether or not it's going to work or not. Now, that said, it can be tricky. I mean, I know a lot of people, I don't know a lot of people. I do know of people who have done that, basically sent paid traffic to affiliate products, and they make money at that because they keep on top of what affiliate products convert, and they are good at highly targeting people through paid ads. Stuff like Google AdWords has gotten harder because it's more expensive, and so it's harder to recoup your money and then make money. Something like Facebook ads or maybe even ads on Twitter is going to be a little more reasonable at doing that. It's been a long time actually since I've paid ads and sent it directly to affiliate products, but just on the basic principles of you have to get traffic fast and you have to have an offer fast to put in front of them in order to make money fast. Well, that's the direction you're likely going to need to go if you want to attempt to make money fast. However, chasing money fast isn't always in the long term the best route to go. I will throw that in.
So what do you think is better? I always get this chicken or egg question. Is it better to build an audience first and then build a product? So you, let's say, figure out like what audience you want to hang out with, and then, start creating content, and then eventually figure out what product that they would be interested in buying, and you offer that to them. Or do you think it's possible to build a product first, like let's say a high-end online course that you want to sell for about $1,000? Do you think it's possible to build that and sell it without the audience first?
Well, you can sell it without the audience, but you have to have traffic. I think that's an excellent question. It's a really, really good question because it gets to the fundamental of how to make money online. And again, it goes back to creating value that solves a pain of a specific audience. Typically, for most people, the answer I would give is to start with the audience. And the reason for that is it saves you from a lot of pitfalls. Particularly if you're a less experienced entrepreneur, it's very easy to fall in love with your own ideas, to fall in love with your own product. It's very easy to come up with a product idea and then spend months and months and months working on it without even really having a clue as to whether anybody actually wants it. And so I find that typically when people start by thinking about the audience and at least spending a minimal amount of time engaging with that audience, either online or in real life, through conferences, meetups, clubs, whatever, that they're going to do a better job at then picking a product that audience is actually going to want to buy. That said, it's important. I talked about that money milestone, and it's something we encourage our students to get to as quick as possible because we've seen it. It changes their entire perspective. Even if they only make $5, it completely changes their perspective to have made that money online. So I do think it's best to start with the product, but then try to get to a sale as quickly as possible. Now, if I were to amend just a little bit the answer I gave earlier, another way to make money quickly is consulting or coaching. Because that's something you can sell now without having to put a lot of time into creating a product. Basically you just somebody has to believe that you over the next, given amount of time through weekly phone calls, one-on-one or group calls or whatever, can then help them and guide them to a specific result. And I think that one-on-one work, while not scalable, is incredibly valuable for learning what your audience wants, and then you can leverage all that knowledge and the testimonial of that person or people into selling a product versus your coaching services later in the future. So that would be another fast way to make money, would be with coaching or consulting of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That I would say, like, going the dollars for hours route is certainly like the quickest way, and you don't even need a fancy website to do that. You can do that on, a free Weebly site or WordPress.com, and then boom, get your services, up and running.
Right.
But I find it, like the whole point. I think the whole value of actually building the audience first is there's a certain amount of credibility that you develop for yourself if you're hanging out with a group of people or a market niche, and they know you, and if you're producing content that they see and they value and they appreciate. I think in the long run, I mean, they have a relationship with you, and it really kind of builds the trust. So I think it's kind of more challenging to, let's say, come up with a high-end course, for example, without an audience, and then try to go from to leverage paid traffic, and then go from hello to $1,000. But I'm really curious about, like, if you know of any entrepreneurs that might have done that successfully, and or if you've done that successfully, and what worked for you.
Yeah, everything you just said, I agree with. And there was certainly a bit of that with our first product. But like I said, it was about 18 months or so into having a podcast when we launched our first product, and we did have a list of 3 people. Definitely built an audience at that point. Now, the conventional wisdom would have been to sell first, like what we call an entry-level product. We never asked them to buy before. It'd been free information for 18 months. And it's one thing to have a bunch of adoring fans and an audience that appreciates everything you do, and it's another thing to actually get them to buy from you and to train them to expect to buy from you, and that there's value in what you have to offer. We came up with a $2,000 coaching course, and most people would have thought that was kind of crazy as a first foray into selling to an audience that had been getting free information for over 18 months. But like I said, it sold out, and it made us almost $80,000 in that first launch. So if it's the right offer in front of the right audience, it certainly can work. And, earlier this year, we had an incredibly successful launch where we had people from our podcast buying coaching for $6,000 from us. So it is certainly possible to sell that high-end stuff. You just, you need to have the empathy for what your audience really, really wants, and hit dead on the value that they're looking for, and then obviously have that credibility that that the value is there, and that's all. That audience building is what brings you that insight into your audience and brings you that credibility and relationship, such that it's much easier to get them to want to buy from you.
Yeah, I think a critical component of this picture too, which I wish I did much better in my previous endeavor, which is really cultivating that subscriber list. So you have regular communications with them, so that they know you're a real person and you're available, and so that, like, in marketing industry terms, you have a quote unquote responsive list. So I'm curious, the 3,000 email subscriber list that you had, did you consider them to be highly responsive? Like, do you have any idea of, like, what that means in terms of open and click-through rates?
That was so long ago, I'd have to go back and look. I know we were getting open rates of over 50% at the time, which is incredibly high, really.
Really good. That's really, really
good. A lot of people, they get depressed when they say 30, and I tell them, look, like 30 is not unheard of in most industries. It's like, it's when you start getting to 15 or 10% or lower, you got to start wondering, what are you doing to but, so that is to say, like, I don't know the specific numbers, but they were highly engaged, and here's why. If you think about what it took for them to get on that list, that they had the desire, something in them that said, I'm gonna go and see what I can listen to about starting a business, or probably even as specifically as saying, it might be cool to start an internet business, or I want something different. I hate my job. And for whatever reason, somebody, got them an iPod or iPhone for Christmas, or they already used iTunes or whatever. Like, they decide, let's look and see what podcasts there are. And so they search, and they find a bunch of podcasts on the topic, and for whatever reason ours sticks out, and they go, I'm going to listen to these guys, and then they listen to an episode or 2 or 3, and then often if they like it, they start devouring them over a good amount of time, and so at some point though, they've listened to that, and in every episode we invite them to go and sign up for our list. And so that means they went from walking their dog and listening to an episode to right there, either on their phone or when they got home, going to our landing page that we put in the call to action for every show, signing up for the email list, getting those emails over time, reading those emails, opening those emails, reading those emails, clicking then through to the offer. So by the time they get to the offer, these people, they know us, they like us, they trust us. It's not like we just sent them from an ad and this is the first they've ever heard from us. Like the people on that list were highly targeted prospects.
Mm-hmm. So, hey, we're about coming to the end of our episode, and I could continue talking to you for a long time, but we got to wrap it up. So I'd love to leave with you some of my last questions. Can you tell me, Jason, what the biggest mistake you've made in your entrepreneurial journey was that you'd do differently if you had another chance?
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's it's a very interesting question because on the one hand, it kind of reminds me of the movie It's a Wonderful Life, where the character gets to a point where he's all like, depressed and feeling like he's messed it all up, and then he goes back and sees kind of like how the sum of his life has actually led to a lot of interesting things and impacted people's lives. You asked me about the aha moment early on that I had, and it really was a series of aha moments, and I continue to have them, and it happens over years. And many times those aha moments come because I ended up in a situation that I hated, that wasn't working well, that some might call a failure or something that are really messed up. So while there also are some things where I could go back and go, wow, that would have been really nice to avoid some of that pain or some of that lost money or some of that. At the same time, it'd be a weird thing, if we had like some simulator that we could say, hey, what if I erase this event from my life? What would my life look like? And we might be surprised to know it's like, oh, there's this huge lesson I learned from that I didn't even realize it. And had I not learned that lesson, then all these other good things wouldn't have happened. So, that's why I actually have a hard time wanting to go and say, oh, I wish I had just like done this completely differently, because I think that where I'm at now is the sum of many, many things. But let me give you one answer just to satisfy the question. That's a really good one. And that is, I would say between, we had huge growth between like 2005, 2009. Around 2009, I think we had a good amount of success, and we wanted to enjoy our hard work over the last 4 years. And we stopped innovating. We stopped trying as hard with our show. We kept doing the show, but definitely we stopped being as true to our voice, and we started comparing ourselves to other marketers who are doing things in other ways, making more money than us. And we thought we needed to do it the way that they wanted to do it. In fact, we talked a lot about this in Smart Passive Income episode 100 with Pat. We go really into depth on it if people want to hear more about that. But I'd say there's a good 2 years where we weren't true to ourselves, weren't true to our voice, weren't true to our audience, and tried to do things in a different way. And we fell into a number of traps that set our business back. And I wish I could go back and not have allowed that complacency to happen for those couple years, because it happens to be those 2 years also where a lot of people were coming up on our heels and starting new blogs and new podcasts, and and so these days, like the growth, it's not as big as it was in the first few years when podcasting was brand new, and 100 times less people doing what we're doing than now. So that would be the one thing I'd say. You got to be true to yourself and not get distracted from that.
Here. I completely and totally 100% agree with you. It's so important, especially if you're an entrepreneur, to be true to yourself. You will save so much time, energy, and money just by doing that one thing.
Agreed.
So what is the most effective way to change the world?
The most effective way to change the world is to first figure out what it is that you have to give to the world. And we all have, it's a concept we call the single motivating purpose. And it's essentially a statement. In fact, we have a whole process in our course about this. It's a process you go through that's a statement that sums up in one phrase, in one statement, what it is that you love to do most, the strengths that you bring to the world, and how you can make your biggest impact in the world. And for me, my phrase is I get up in the morning in order to share knowledge and resources that help others to live lives of increasing freedom, fulfillment, and purpose. And my business allows me to do that. Now, my business is only one place I manifest that, but by now using that as a compass in my parenting, in my volunteer work, in my business, and everything that I do, I find that not only am I happier and more fulfilled, but I also make a bigger impact in everything I do, because I have taken the time to appreciate and discover my strengths and let go of the things that I'm not good at, and amplify in everything that I do the stuff that I'm really meant to do, if you want to say it that way. So find that purpose and then use it as a compass and just manifest it in everything you do, unabashedly, boldly, full self-expression. That's the way to change the world.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jason. How can we best stay in touch with you?
Well, if any of the stuff we've been talking about resonates, it's certainly the kind of thing we talk about a lot on our show. So search in iTunes or Stitcher for Internet Business Mastery, or go to internetbusinessmastery.com.
Fantastic. Thank you. Enjoy a beautiful Parisian day.
I will. Thank you, Lorna.